Good time zone internet. Hello and welcome to... Oh, that's a problem. Welcome to Design Club. I am your humble Design Club host, Will, joined as always by my pal, Geoff. We are the only show on the internet where, Geoff, do you know what really annoying thing happens? So I go to set up. I set up for this show like a half hour in advance, right? I get everything all set up. I get the dashboard going. I do all of the things, right? Geoff, what just happened to my YouTube login as we were going? Like as we were beginning.
You to re-log in?
Yes, I got kicked out of our dashboard as the show started, so I can't see if there are any problems because it literally kicked me out of the dashboard as I hit go live. Amazing, wonderful. We're doing the thing.
Well, I see Bull just chatted in live.
Yes, no, we're live. That's not the problem. The problem, and we've been live for the appropriate amount of time. The problem is I couldn't see that we were live, so that's cool.
Let's start again. So, Will, what show is this? What are we doing?
This is Design Club. It's the only game design show on the internet where we have a really scuffed opening because there are tech problems and it's all YouTube's fault. I'm your humble host, Will, joined as always by my pal, Geoff. Say hi to the people, Geoff.
Hi to the people, Geoff. Hey, everybody. I am Geoffrey Zatkin, the studio director of Extra Credits and Extra History and longtime game designer, 25 plus years, here today to argue with Will.
Yes. We're gonna
collegial and colloquial and civil manner.
Yes.
In no way unhinged.
Yes.
About something that he and I, when we were discussing topics Tuesday,
yes,
fundamentally disagreed on.
And we might
rather than spend 2 hours doing it there, we figured we'd spend 2 hours doing it here.
Yes, and I think fascinatingly, we disagree more now than we did then, which is interesting. So I'm and we should explain that I think for my part
talk about before we explain why we disagree.
Right, yeah. I should explain that when we do this, I think we're both open to the idea that our ideas will be changed, and we're not doing this like I will always tell you all when I'm taking a point of view that I don't fully agree with for the sake of making an interesting conversation. I am still trying to figure out what I believe here. So this one is going to be particularly interesting because Geoff is professionally vested very heavily in this for a bunch of very good reasons, and I'm personally very invested in this for a whole bunch of personal reasons, so it's gonna be weird. Okay, so this is your warning. This is going to be weird. Please enjoy. So
I feel like we should start playing the how it's done intro.
Yeah,
you came at a bad time. Crack.
Yeah, right. So okay. Let me start with a story, and then I'll explain how we got to this conversation, and then we'll talk. Okay?
Okay.
So this past week, Matt and I wanted to play...
You gotta say Once Upon a Time. That's how we start stories.
Once upon a time in the kingdom of Twitch, there were two princes, Matt and Will, and they wanted to play a game together. That game was called Fellowship. Fellowship came out last week. They had a bit of a rough launch, as most live service games tend to right now, because as per usual, the hype exceeded their capacity to get servers, and because it was their early access launch, they didn't have funds to get more servers yet. So now they're scaling up their infrastructure, dealing with all the problems while the game is in early access, which is always fun. But Fellowship at launch had a problem, and the problem was as follows. Fellowship is a game that is a dungeon running game with 4 players. It matchmakes players together, and it matchmakes 1 tank with 1 healer and 2 DPS to form a party. Okay, that's the important part. All of the other minutia about Fellowship can go out the window because what we're talking today is that concept. And they were having trouble firing queues. Because what
do you mean by firing queues?
They were having trouble successfully matchmaking parties and having people run content and play the game. And the problem is that the breakdown of 100% of the player base in the queue was as follows. 20% of the player base was playing healer.
Or queuing as
healer, yes.
Right.
78% of the player base was queuing as a DPS.
Wait. So 78 plus, you said 78?
78.
Plus 20, that's 98%. So that leaves 2% queuing as
tank.
Wait, I'm assuming they don't have a fill position. So queuing as tank, which is one of the three things that, excuse me, which needs to be 25% for them to basically clear successfully.
Yes, correct. So, and some might argue it's the most...
That's rough.
Yeah, some might argue it's, in that particular game, it's the most difficult and important position because they are in charge of routing the dungeon. That's their job as the tank, and that's a little difficult for new players. So
actually, never mind. I'll ask what routing the dungeon in that context means later. But
yeah, so, and this got us to talking about... Originally, I think it was why playing tank is less appealing to some people. And then we started getting to talk about the Trinity, right? The Trinity that many games, not all games, use, which is DPS, healers, and tanks.
And at that point, I said to Will, I'm allowed to swear on Twitch, right?
Yeah, you can swear on Twitch.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That is a made-up grouping that is actually, in my opinion, bad game design, because nobody actually sticks to it, and there is no holy trinity. Like, people talk about it, but only a tiny percent of games use it. They break that rule, and it's a weird setup anyway, and it's good shorthand for a couple of things, but it exists purely because some game designers design games around that as opposed to any other outlying reason.
Right. And there are a bunch of, I would say that I think we agree that there are efficiency reasons why one might use them in a game like Fellowship.
But you could also have 5 positions or 2 positions.
Correct.
Or like it, those
you could
three
have...
that they happen to have picked are things that they should have designed their game around if they decided to pick them. But there's no reason that they had to pick them.
Okay, so all right. So we agree that archetypes or groupings of characters are necessary to fire match-made queues in a variety of games.
No.
Well,
Okay. Only if you design that way. Like
sure. But like we're sort of admitting of games like when we're talking about the analytical part of this, right? We're focusing largely on games that already have archetypes, right? We're gonna be talking.
Sure, but like archetypes are weird. Like take League of Legends, which also has had a queuing problem like this,
right?
Because what people are queuing for in League is lane positions. You are queuing for top lane, jungle, mid lane, bot lane, damage, support.
Right.
Like those are the 5 things you're queuing for. And when you queue in League, you pick your 2 primary positions. I want this one or this one. And every once in a while, if it can't matchmake quickly enough, it just says, sorry, I know you queued as mid and support, but for this match, you're playing jungle, kid.
Good luck.
And that's their solution for doing it. And like they tamper with it. Like there are some versions of League where if you queue for it, it'll say, I'm sorry, those 2 positions you picked, those are currently way overdone. At least one of those has to be one of these 2 positions which are underdone. Like there are lots of technical ways to get around kind of the hard choices. But League, as I said, queues for lane position, not for role. Okay,
so lane position is not an archetype. Right. And would you say that role is an archetype? Let's go back one.
It could be.
Right, yeah. We're already, by the way, hopelessly off the way we thought this would go, which is great.
Okay, I'm just bringing up that also, in addition to them setting up their archetypes in such a way that one grouping of them was so unpopular that only 2% of the people are picking it.
Correct.
There are also other ways that they could be managing their queues to get people playing faster.
Correct. They do have a couple of additional problems which they've foisted upon themselves, but the point is well taken. We don't need to go deep into the problems of why Fellowship can't flex queue.
Actually, to finish on this point real quick, League is very interesting in that you can pick what we would call different archetypes within the same lane. Going mid lane, you could be playing what they call a mage. You could be playing what they call an enchanter. You could be playing what they call an assassin. There are even occasionally people who take an ADC mid lane, basically an auto-attacking marksman character. They don't call them ADCs anymore. They call them marksmen. So just because you're going mid doesn't necessitate the role you're playing.
Yep.
There are also, if you're playing the jungle role, there are assassin jungles and tank jungles.
And this is, by the way, we're using League here, not because it's even the most popular, because it is the simpler case of the two predominant MOBAs. Dota
is also the more popular one than Dota.
Sure. That's not why I think it's useful here. Geoff just likes rubbing that bit in. Dota is so much worse because the concept of role and position only sort of by the game and community's own admission kind of quasi exist at different, and you change roles and positions frequently throughout the game, and it is an absolute mess if you don't play Dota already. So we're not going to go into that, but before anyone's like, why are you just talking about League and not Dota? Because Dota's worse for this. Dota's so much worse.
League is easier to understand than Dota. I don't think almost nobody argues that point.
No, even the most diehard Dota fans will be like, oh yeah, the learning curve's a brick wall and you're going to lose for the first 250 hours, but like, it's a great game. Once you get through the 250 hours of tutorial, good luck. So
I basically was telling Will that I think the Holy Trinity is the Holy Trinity, as opposed to, as it goes with DPS, tank, and healer, is just a construct, and that there's nothing particularly special about it. It is just some games glom to that, but also they then break those rules almost immediately.
I think that that's fair. So I'm trying to like not immediately go into a giant tangent. So why do games include archetypes in general, whether or not they're the Trinity? Right?
Wait, say it again, I'm sorry.
Why do games include archetypes, whether or not those archetypes can be routed back, traced back, pointed towards in some direction the Trinity classes or the Trinity archetypes?
So there's a couple reasons, Will. And I'm going to bring up one of your favorite G names.
Yeah, sure.
I think they're genres in a weird kind of way, because I know how much we agree on genre as well.
Right. I just love that you're taking the opposite point that you take on genre with these. So like, it's very fun and interesting, but go on.
Well, the purpose of a genre is to allow, like, to say, hey, Will, I like shooter games. That gives you a general grouping of characteristics where when you search through your encyclopedic knowledge of games, and I'm like, Will, I like shooter games. Can you recommend me a shooter? You're able to sort through those tens of thousands of games, and go to a much smaller grouping. They're like, oh, I know what Geoff roughly means by this. Or if I'm like, hey, I like MOBAs. I like, physics racing games. Like by adding a genre and maybe a descriptor or two, I can help you narrow down from all the things it could be to a thing that is easier to understand. And I feel like the archetypes are set up to do the same kind of thing. That if somebody comes into a game, if there's 14 classes to pick from, and they're like, well, here's your tanky classes, here's your DPS classes, here's your healy classes, here's your crowd control classes. As you start throwing, here's your scouty, sneaky classes. As you start throwing that in there, people can be like, oh, okay, cool. I wanted to play a sneaky character. I kind of, here are the things I should be looking at more. It's like, oh, weird. That looks like a mage, but it says it's sneaky. I should check it out anyway, where I might have ignored. So being able to throw kind of archetype things on helps people both pick characters, and particularly for large games with large amounts of players, like Warhammer Online or Final Fantasy 14, when you start doing the really big things and get, go from 8 to 24 people or even 8 people. If you had to individually know 8 different archetypes and balance those versus saying, okay, hey, here's a couple of tanky guys, here's a couple of this, here's a couple of this, it shorthands it to a way that lets players more easily assemble parties or large groups of people and have an idea what they're doing. So that's a couple reasons. Basically, early familiarity and ability to manage large groups of people where there are roles to play.
Okay. I think we can agree on that. So your beef is then not with the idea usefulness of archetypes broadly, but rather with the notion that there is something fundamental and
there's nothing special about what people call the Holy Trinity.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right. So, okay, because I super disagree with that, which is great.
Yeah.
This is awesome. We're gonna super disagree for the next 2 hours, and it's gonna be a lovely time. So, obviously, there are games in which there is not tanking to be done.
Yes, or healing.
Right. Or
damage.
DPSing, right? So I'd like to take, for the sake of this discussion, I would like to take the fantasy / mechanical veneer off of what those archetypes are and talk about their sort of, I'm going to say quasi-mathematical, the way that they actually influence the game.
Okay.
Because I think that helps us. I think that helps me make my point, and I think it helps us get people out of we're talking about just MMOs. Because I think it's really easy when we get into this to be thinking about just MMOs. Like you listed a bunch of MMOs, and that's fair, right? MOBAs, MMOs, hero shooters tend to have very archetype-based matchmaking party composition systems because those are conveniences which allow those developers to get queues to fill, right? To get parties to fill, right? By saying...
And that's also a small amount of games in the industry.
Sure.
Like you're not going to say the Holy Trinity applies to Bejeweled or Candy Crush.
Sure. But we're also only going to be I think we also have to narrow. We can't talk about every game. I think we have to narrow it down to games which include a group of characters or players that are attempting to achieve a goal. That's the most that we could ever do, right? So like the most we could
single player meaning something like a party, or let's even call it a person with lots of followers or something that has you fielding things like that, or a group game where people take on roles for one or in some cases more, because there are games where you might control a couple of people, but it's still a group game and all those come together.
Yes. Right. Okay.
So I think,
so we're okay with that limitation, right? That we're not talking about Bejeweled or Candy Crush because obviously those don't admit of this because they're not multiplayer games, or they're not group oriented games, whether it's single or multiplayer.
Right, but even it's weird because you see influence on things like that. Like Slay the Spire is a single player game,
sure,
but Ironclad has an archetype that more resembles, say, a tanky kind of character. Like he was made fighter, Defect is a mage, Silent is a thief. Like they're cool takes on it, but that's kind of their base archetype from, fantasy Dungeons and Dragons-y kind of thing.
But if you can't reduce the archetype of a game that is wildly popular and does a very good job of approaching things to anything further than two things which vaguely approximate two roles of the Trinity, and a third one which is arguably the hidden fourth branch of the Trinity from OG D&D, and we could talk about that later. I don't know if that strengthens your point, because I feel
no, I'm just saying that there's also influence. So like some of the things people might say call tanky might actually end up being other things, and tanky can mean different things in different games.
Okay, that's fair.
So for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, the ability to tank is the ability to basically have lots of hit points, be hard to hit, and be able to, in some way, encourage things to attack you.
Right. The Ancestor Spirit Barbarian is a great example of this. Has a gajillion hit points and rage, and has an ability that says, if you're not fighting me, you're not fighting well.
But it also shows that like D&D has almost no, what you would call tanking from, say, Final Fantasy XIV or EverQuest or other things. The ability to manipulate who attacks who is almost entirely absent from D&D.
Ooh, but I would say that the mechanical that is overmapping a particular way that tanking is done from a certain genre of games onto the concept of being a tank, and I disagree that that's fundamentally necessary to something being a tank.
Oh, 100%.
Because, for
But,
instance,
like, that is when we discuss 14 or some of the other things. Because, for example, in League of Legends, tanks are good at crowd control. That is one of the things that tanks do in League of Legends. You attack them because otherwise they're going to keep you stunned, knocked back, et cetera, for a while, and you can't actually get to the squishy targets you want to kill. In D&D, barbarians and fighters paladins don't particularly do that. It's more the mages and the sorcerers and the bards who excel in, webs and hypnotic patterns and slow and other stuff. So groups mix that around a lot too, which is fun. And as it should be.
I agree. I just don't think that.
And that gets to where I think people might say it's a tank, but then immediately break the archetype, or it's a DPS, and then they immediately break the archetype. Like it's DPS, but they also have some CC and.
Let's back up. Let's back up. Okay, because I think that now we're getting hung up on what it means to be those archetypes. So I'd like to step one step back and talk about what we mean when we say tank, healer, DPS.
And that's the thing. We don't. Because everyone
I actually think we
up.
absolutely do. We absolutely do. And I will illustrate in this fashion. Okay?
Sure.
So we are playing the world's most boring game. Are you ready for this?
Risk?
Good try. No, it's very good, though. It's very good. I'm going to haul up in Madagascar, and I'll see you in 3 hours. Okay.
It's not the most boring. I enjoyed plenty of games of Risk when I was younger.
Right. Okay. So our goal is to, through a variety of means, mathematically increase our number to a goal value. Bear with me on this.
Okay.
And along the way, there will be things which try and stop us getting to the goal value, right? We have the most basic game theory style. It's not exactly game theory because I don't really want to teach game theory on Twitch or YouTube. Thanks. It's we are reducing this to its most fundamental form. We have a value, it's a numeric one, and we have a group of players working towards that goal.
Okay.
We can act in several ways towards that goal. Okay? And admitting of oppositional forces, there are things that are going to happen that may try to reduce our goal number, right? Or may overcome or may provide additional hindrance on our ability to advance the goal number towards the, we're trying to get to 100, and it may say at 80, this thing happens, right? Okay. So there are ways that we can act on it. We can make number go up. That's a very simple, straightforward. We're trying to reach a goal. We have to make the number go up.
Okay. So I'm playing pinball. I have to keep hitting the ball.
There's also the possibility that the number might go down, which means that we have two options. We can stop the number from going down, or we can repair the number, fix the number, make the number go back up once it has gone down. Is there a third way? Is there a fourth way that we can interact with the notion of advancing towards a goal methodically besides make number go big, stop number from going down, fix number when it does go down?
Yeah.
Like?
We could find route that circumvents need for number. We could cause number to join our side.
No.
You're getting too simple.
Why? Because I would argue that what we call tank, healer, DPS are really just skinned, packaged versions of the way that some, again, absolutely not all, some games act on the idea of having a group of people achieve a goal together. And I can use Rock Band.
So I think this gets back to my fundamental argument that if you make a game where that's the entire purpose, some games designed to just those archetypes, but it's an artificial constraint. Because throw in thief, let's sneak around it. throw in Bard. Let's fast talk it so the fight doesn't happen.
Sure.
Like if all you're designing is must manipulate numbers in a fight that purely only matter on do I do damage, do I prevent damage, do I heal damage, then
I will remove fighting from my example entirely. Rock band.
Okay.
Rock band has 4 roles, right? It has 4 instruments. It has vocals, guitar, bass, and drums. They all serve different sub roles within the band, right?
Tell me more.
Okay, great, excellent, awesome. You have several groups which lead in making score go up, right? Everyone makes score go up.
Yep.
But some jobs inexorably make job go up faster because they play more notes. And those notes are worth points, and that's how you score, right? Traditionally, that's the vocalist and the guitarist. Okay. You have sometimes it's the drummer. It depends on
drummers
the song.
may do more interaction than either of those two because they're hitting multiple different.
I think okay. I will fully
anyway, okay. I'm not quite sure where you're going with this, but carry on.
There is a job in Rock Band, and I know because it's my favorite job, and I play support in every game, whose job it is to remain steady and to fix problems when they start happening. When the band starts failing out of the song, that's the bassist's job. The bassist's job is to do something incredibly boring until they are needed to get people back on track and back into the song.
What do you do when... Actually, I'm really curious. I don't remember
the bassist star power has the ability to get people back on track.
Can't everybody use star power?
They can, but bassists tend to have more of it just because of the way that bassist works.
Okay.
I didn't come with a full dossier on the analysis.
It's an interesting example. I'm trying to understand where you're going with
my
this.
point, right, is that you are using the language of fights. And what I am saying is that I not only disagree with you to the extent that I think that there is something about the Trinity that maps strongly to most roles in most games that include the ideas of archetypes and fighting. I will go one further and say that if we remove the fighting veneer from those archetypes, that those archetypes are seen in other games that do not involve combat.
Okay, so wait, who's the healer and who's the tank in Rock Band?
I would loosely argue that, and again, we're not going to get into the minutia on this, but go with me on this. The bassist is the healer, the tank is the drummer, and the other two are DPS. That's my loose argument.
The tank attracts aggro? I mean, the drummer attracts...
No, because aggro is only involved if we're fighting.
So the drummer keeps...
The drummer plays
number from going down.
Yes, correct. Because they're the one that
I completely don't see it.
Okay, that's fine. I can. We're not going to derail and let me make the full argument about how having the drummer keep everyone on track is the same as tanking, but that's an argument. Or we can look at sports. Let's look at sports.
Sure, I was actually going to bring it up.
Okay, cool. Soccer.
Before we started, you were asked some hey, think of a game with a group of characters where there are archetypes that don't map to the Holy Trinity.
Yep.
Madden.
Yeah.
Straight up, a group of characters with archetypes that in no way map to the Holy Trinity.
Okay. So you have a bunch of why did we pick Madden? I was going to use soccer/football, but sure, we can use the game I know nothing about because I hate football. No, it's fine. So all right, in Madden, right, you have linemen, and by the way, we're going to have to admit that multiple characters in a group can map to can map to individual roles, right? We have to admit of the idea that in a group of more than 4 people or more than 3 people, you could have multiple tanks, multiple DPS, multiple.
Right. I guess part of what we have to be careful of here is that we're not leaving out other roles. In other words, if it looks like we only have 3 things and we're trying to shove everything into those, that leaves open the possibility that there are many other roles.
I agree.
Which we are ignoring because we're trying to shove everything in Or specifically, you're trying to shove everything into those three?
I would say that they are occasionally subdivided, but that we still have at its root people that stop us from losing, people that fix mistakes, and people that advance us towards a goal. And that everyone does all of those things. But they do
if it is
one of them
basically
more.
make number go down, make number go up, keep number from going up or down, or mitigate, then not really. Or you take a game like StarCraft. There's lots of units with roles. They don't map to...
Does StarCraft qualify for our conversation, though? Because I've already knocked out
archetypes.
Pokemon. I preemptively knocked out Pokemon in the Discord because that one gets really weird, and also all of those are Pokemon's not a good fit.
Pokemon out.
Yeah. Pokemon's not a good fit.
But
if you're over there screaming about
they define roles in there, or classes, ground, flying, infantry, organic, non-organic. I mean, there are a lot of different. You're a game with a group of characters you control.
Okay, but what have been RTSs?
Plants
I'm down
versus
with that.
Zombies, a game with a group of characters you control, plants that you put down. Like there are lots of games with groups of characters you control that don't map to. Like Plants vs. Zombies maps more than, say, StarCraft.
Sure.
Because there are ways to heal your damaged plants. But even so, there are also plenty of other roles that are getting taken in there.
I'm gonna be so reductive with StarCraft for a second.
Sure.
And RTSs in general, but I'll stick with StarCraft because it's what we're on. All of StarCraft, 100% of StarCraft boils down to the economy. RTSs are all fundamentally economy games, which means that it is a game about two lines. It's a very dressed up game about two lines, but it is a game about two lines. My economy line and your economy line. And that I have units that make my economy line go up. I have units that make your economy line go down. And I have units that prevent you from effectively reducing my economy line more than yours.
And I have units that scout. I have units that build other units.
Sure. But are you not doing all of those things in the service of either increasing your own economy or damaging mine?
No, not necessarily. I think, again, that's reductive. You're reducing to three roles when there are plenty of others. Because you can shoehorn almost any game into, sure, here's the things that, deal damage. Here's the things that, but a lot of StarCraft has almost no healing. Like if you're saying it is healer, tank, support, StarCraft has almost no tanking. Like
it has units which are tankier and also has base defenses, which I would say fill the role of tank.
Sure. Units that are tankier is not tank.
I would divide StarCraft up weirdly. I would say that your, as weird as this sounds, all units that are not economy generating units are DPS. Base defenses and bases are tanks, and literally SCVs, probes, drones for Zerg, right? Drones, yeah, okay, not losing my mind. Are the things that fill the support / healer role.
Right. But then take something like an observer, which is basically it's a scout. Like scouting is a big role in RTSs. Sure. Same as like thief in first edition D&D. So again, you can shoehorn things into Trinity, but there are plenty of other roles that are needed and make these games work, and that they would not work without those games.
I think I am going to stick to my guns and say that scouting, in this case, is a force multiplier on your ability to accomplish your goal. It is just another avenue. Information is a strong currency.
Right, but what archetype is an observer? It's not a tank. It's not a healer.
It's a DPS.
And it's not a DPS.
Oh, it absolutely is a DPS because information is a way that you...
No.
Yes, it is. Information is a way that you do damage to your enemy's economy.
Observers do 0 damage. They have no attacks.
They provide you with the ability to do damage by observing. If I can't call it a new,
that is stretching your definition.
I don't think it is.
Out.
I don't think it is.
Well, and again, see, you're falling back to your fundamental thing. It's like Matt's abolish everything lectern thing. It's like, you have to believe me, I'm standing behind a lectern. It's like, you have to believe it. It can influence this one archetype.
But I think that you are overly resistant to this because you don't believe that it can be done. And so when I point out the fundamental nature of the direction...
I think it can. I think there are games that have perfectly balanced those three things. I'm just saying they're exceedingly rare, and that most games don't have them, and that most games that do and think they do break their rules all the time.
I actually think that every game that includes them does, because I don't think that they actually like, we're going to get to a point here. I'm going to say that they exist and that they are the fundamentals around which we build archetypes, but that they are the extremes of a three-pointed graph at which no unit can ever occupy the most extreme edge of any of them. There is no
such... by the way, fundamentally disagree with it really comes down to make number go up, make number go down, prevent number.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, again, if you're coming back to the archetype, when I'm like, Will, do you want to play a healer, or a tank, or a DPS? You are... okay, maybe you, but 99% of the people aren't thinking, my job is make number go up. They're thinking, cool, I'm going to be casting healing spells and shielding spells, and maybe I'm going to be scaring away undead. And, there are things that are associated with the archetype and how it feels and how it plays. Because again, we're going back to why do we have the archetype? It lets people know roughly the set of things that you're going to be doing.
I agree with that. I'm simply saying that your argument that they are an arbitrary and unnecessary contrivance is not true. That's my fundamental argument. I think we agree on there is no such thing as a game which it perfectly implements the Trinity. I agree that overly adhering to the notion of the Trinity is bad and doesn't lead to good gameplay. And we'll get to all of these here in a second. I agree that... there are things which blend and do not obviously conform to one point of the Trinity. I just think that you say that they are outside of that. I say that they are between them, right? Because in my mind, right, we can put all characters in a two-dimensional triangular grid and map them to some combination milieu. We could even make it a pyramid if we really needed to like get the three-dimensionality or whatever in, but that there is a fundamental understanding to the way that games work when it concerns a group of people achieving an objective that has the bones of make number go up, stop number from going down, fix number when number screws up in it.
And again, I think you're being very reductive.
No, I think I'm dealing with the I think, and again, I'm not.
I think you're leaving out huge aspects of gameplay. Like, take 5th edition D&D. There are 3 pillars that they identify as being part of D&D. Combat is one, exploration is one, and social is one. That is what they consider the 3 pillars that the game is based on.
Sure.
And so that there is room for the, fast talking bard and the socials and the interaction and the intimidation and the exploration with the scouting and survival and the strategic planning that goes around all of that, in addition to the combat.
Sure.
And so if the only thing you're measuring on are those 3 things, you're missing all of these other parts of the game. And what's the name of the game? Fellowship? Fellowship is interesting because they're removing, they're going in there chopping out all of these other parts, and they're saying all that we're centering on is this dungeon run.
Yeah.
So for them, it makes more sense to it's cool, you are not doing the social, you are not doing the exploration. Well, you are, but you're not doing the exploration in the way that we see it in other games.
Right.
I'm assuming, are their dungeons random and instanced?
The dungeons are instanced, though not random. They are all, at each difficulty level, they are known and you can map them.
So, in other words, you can go online, look up the dungeon, so you don't need that part of exploration.
Yes, there's no fog of war. You can mouse over and see the whole map.
For a game like that, it is much more something that could play to that archetype, but I've almost, or that set of archetypes, so we can discuss whether that's a useful grouping or not in a minute, but I've almost never seen another game that doesn't have all of these other parts of gameplay as well that aren't covered by the little
right, and like
Trinity over here.
Right, and for an example, right, in WoW, right, which is a game that Fellowship draws heavily from, but is much larger and has other things like raids. There are utilities that things which fit into, which are called DPS, healers, and tanks. There are utilities which those bring, which are of additional value. For instance, Warlock's Portal, right, is of additional non-direct DPS value to the thing.
Crafters.
Right, yeah.
Like, there's a whole bunch of parts of that game. Like,
I have
you could be a paladin that is also a crafter.
Sure. I have unironically, years ago, referred to crafting max HP food for my raid as preemptive healing, but like that's neither here nor there. That's mostly because I'm the healer and it's much easier to heal you if you have more HP. But that's like, your point is taken, right? That there are whole
other parts of the game. Like, an interesting thing is first edition D&D, there were 4 not quite archetypes, but like it was based around the fighter, the mage, the wizard, and at that point they were called the thief.
Yeah.
And those were kind of the 4 classes that you were supposed to have in a party that held it up, because first edition was a lot more survival rogue-esque than current D&D is. And so having a character that could scout and backstab and pickpocket, even though they did it horribly at low levels, like first edition thieves were just
bad,
so gimped.
They're very bad. They're not good.
But
I also think
they also threw in things like the monk, which you're like, wait, where does he go?
I also think that we are coming at this from 2 different angles, and I think that chat largely agrees with you on the angle that you're coming from, and I totally understand why my point isn't landing. You are largely coming at this from a game first, analytical, example based orientation, right? You are correctly, I think, for your point of view, pointing at things that don't work. And I am trying, I think unsuccessfully, to philosophically consider what it means for something to be a game without actually existing. Like, I'm thinking of an a priori game, which might be the first time that I've unironically used the phrase a priori on this channel in like the 7 years I've been here. So
you have to tell people what a priori means.
A priori means without reference to experience. So it means that geometry is true a priori. Geometry does not need an experiment to prove that it is true. It is logically and rigorously true in a void that in which no human has experience. You can logic your way into all of Euclid's geometry if you accept his 5th postulate, and we can argue about that later, without experiencing anything, just using pure logic. I'm trying to get to the behind the thing, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. So I will say that for the sake of our time, I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you, but nor am I convinced that there is not a math layer beneath a lot of the assumptions that we make in game design, that like there is what it means for something to be a game with a goal. And I think that I will need time to craft an appropriately convincing argument of.
And part of it is too, so like, let me state part on your side. I fundamentally think you could build a game balanced around 3 archetypes that you label as DPS, healer, and tank.
Yeah.
I think that would also be, in some cases, people still, but even if you did, people still wouldn't understand it, because they might say, I want to be a sneaky character. Who should I play? I want to be a crowd control-y character.
Sure. I will even go further and say that such a game would be beyond mind-numbingly boring and no one would play it. that the game that I am talking about that is beyond the veneer, right? If we have a game that has a pure tank, a pure healer, and a pure DPS, is not worth playing and is boring as sin. Because
actually, the time it would be the most interesting.
Yes.
Let me throw you a life. Well, not a lifeline. Let me throw you where I think it would be the most interesting. A single player game where you're playing a party.
Yes.
In other words, if you were controlling 4 or 5 characters, all of whom conform to a very strict archetype,
yep,
you're going to be like, cool. You know, I have my 2 DPS, my 2 tanks, and my healer in my party.
Yep.
Tanks are going to, you know, this is a strategic game. Tanks are going to march up to the front, block access, where my melee DPS will be between them, getting shielded. My archer DPS will be sitting back, or, you know, mage will be sitting back, throwing spells, and my healer will be sitting there making sure that people like it as a single player experience. It's turning those into basically tools that you are
right. They're elements,
individual tool bags. They're
elements of your holistic approach that are manifested in characters which you choose to become part of your party. Yeah.
But like, it's weird. Like, say you're playing Final Fantasy Tactics, Will.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm gonna play White Mage.
Yeah.
Because White Mage does heal.
Sure.
And buff and soul.
Right. No. Yeah. Right. No. Like even the most. Okay. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, like we have to admit that even the things that we put on the thumbnail don't fit. Right. White Mage learns holy. Right. Caitlyn has traps. Those are not DPS. Those are a kind of tanking. Right.
All right. Well, the traps is specifically a form of crowd control, which in your example probably falls into tanking, even though I also disagree with
the whole
and her net, which does some damage, pushes her backwards out of the way of things and slows down the person hit.
Yes.
And Reinhardt is
giant
a
stun,
beefy dude, but he's also going to kick your butt if you don't do something about him.
Correct. Yeah. So okay. So let's I also Suma over on YouTube chat is brought up a very interesting point that I want to go to your point that like these are not real. So classes are almost all the same relative to other classes of their role. Completely disagree. As Savage Raider in 14, completely disagree. And there's an important reason why, right? None of the jobs in any MMO, and I especially will include 14, are
keep going on your 14.
Are pure archetypes, right? Healers are required to do damage. It's necessary to clear every enrage in the game at the Savage and Ultimate level. Some EXs even, the healers need to be doing damage. The tanks do damage, right? And some of them have other utility, right? The Paladin can heal. They heal themselves. That is kind of tanking, but also kind of not, right? And we have DPS that do provide healing utility. Summoner, Pictomancer, Dancer, all provide healing. Every DPS class has some kind of self-mitigation and self-healing, right? They are not archetypes, and they're not all equivalent, right? Ask the, let's see, Machinist, Summoner, Dragoon, I don't know, pick your other melee, Reaper party versus the Samurai Black Mage, Dancer, Picto party, right? They are not all equivalent. And that's important because if they were equivalent, it would suck, right? Perfectly balanced games and games which adhere too strongly to archetypes, and I think we absolutely agree on this, are boring, right? Because it is in breaking those archetypes, it is in the space between the archetypal points, right, that we find interesting things, right?
And let me actually tell you about a really interesting design exercise that I participated in, I think it was 24 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So EverQuest had been out for a couple of years, and we were starting the design for EverQuest 2 because nobody thought games lasted more than a couple of years. So the thing you did was you made a sequel. Well, did I just get louder?
No.
Okay.
It's just you. You're also locked down, so you can't get too loud here. But keep going.
That's good. Anyway, so one of the problems EverQuest had was that there was a party size of 6, and there were 14 classes. And some classes, probably rightly so, felt that they were not as valuable to a party as other classes were. And this is ignoring raids and other things, because 98% of at least the game plus the first couple expansions was party-based. Like, there were raids, but bigger and bigger raids came on later. And so, for example, the cleric was straight up the best healer.
Mm-hmm.
Druids and shamans were really good, were actually more efficient over time with HOTS and some other things. But if you needed somebody to heal quickly, it was the cleric. If you needed damage done the quickest from a mage caster, it was a wizard. Necromancers, the best CC was the enchanter. Mm-hmm. Bards had the best utility. But at a certain point, people were like, we need pretty much always an enchanter in the party because of the crowd control.
Sure.
And so one of the things that is, we were talking about the design for EverQuest 2, back when I was still in the team before I moved to another teams and eventually left to go head up a game at a whole different studio, was a concept that Brad and McQuaid, our producer, had pitched, which was, what if there were only 4 classes you could pick from at the beginning? And then you got to pick specializations when you hit certain levels. And the idea was that if you needed a cleric, any cleric would do. We looked, it was like, what does a cleric fundamentally do? You know, it has the heal, it has the res. So if you went cleric, then to priest or shaman to druid, and then you subbed, from druid down to the specialty below that later, they would still have all the fundamental abilities that cleric did. And the same, if you picked a warrior class, whether it was, fighter or ranger or, pal, whatever it was, barbarian. Actually, barbarian was a race, but yeah, it was. Anyway, sorry, it's been a long time since I designed that game. Yeah. They would have the taunt, they would have the damage absorption. All of the rogue types would have the backstab and the sneaky and the unlocks. All of the mages would have a certain amount of crowd control and damage, and that they'd pick their flavor. But what that would mean is, in a party, at mid levels, when people are like, we need a healer, any cleric that you'd pick, you wouldn't be like, hey, I'm a druid, I'm getting left out of all this. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it had middling success. I left well before the game was finished, but it was kind of an interesting thought on how do we do that in an area where there's going to be more classes than the party size allows, and not penalize people for picking that kind of thing.
Yes.
And so these debates have gone on for a long time. And, for us back then, rogue or sneak was still one of the 4 fundamental archetypes. They were also heavy DPS. But that set of skills they came with were essential to how you played that game.
Right, because you had a bigger emphasis on exploration and fog of war, right?
And honestly, on it was called pulling, which was, there's a lot of mobs over there. How do we get a couple of them to come attack us without getting the whole bunch to do that?
Right.
And classes that could ambush, scout, and get monsters to chase you over to where your party would murder them.
Something that has been moved over time into the idea of tanking was originally its own separate
skill set
that belonged to a different archetype.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I dig.
And so that's part of the evolution, in the same way that when I first started playing League of Legends and saw that their tanks did the crowd control, I was kind of astounded, but then thought, oh, that makes sense, because they were looking for ways to make you want to go hit the tank without only doing you must attack me.
Right, because League, when we're talking about this, we also have to admit that League has a big bump, which is that the aggro table needs to be a psychological concept, because you are dealing with another player and not with an NPC that has an aggro table, right? So that is one of the things that's interesting about League in this example, is that it needs to find a way that encourages you to be attacking the tank, but doesn't enforce you attacking the tank and take away player
kind
agency.
Of like D&D in some cases. There are very few things that you can do that the fighter can do that says, dragon, you must attack me.
Right.
And it's up to the dungeon master to play basically the monster and the intelligence of the monster to kind of do that. And it is for all sorts of different games.
Yeah. Well, and that's why even the barbarian we were talking about earlier, right? That doesn't enforce you attacking them. It just imposes a penalty if you don't. right?
And that's also one of the few ones that does. Like, it is inarguably, for the original 5th edition, that particular subclass of barbarian is one of the best tanks in the game because of that one ability.
Correct. Yeah. I picked a spiky thing. I'm still trying to make my point, Geoff. I'm gonna pick spiky examples, but yes, that is definitely true. That the other sort of tankier, like War Cleric can take damage all day, by the way. Like any of the heavy armor cleric things can just stand in front and not die forever. That doesn't mean they're gonna get people to attack them, but they can do the stand in front and not die forever thing.
As soon as they cast not spiritual wealth, it's the 3rd level. The 3rd level area of effect damage spell that clerics get now that's amazing.
I don't know. I haven't looked at D&D since the last time we ran a one-shot, and I only looked enough to answer chat questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Hold on. I got
Yeah. Spirit Guardians. Yeah.
Whoops, hold on. Wrong. I hit the wrong thing. Where did it go? There we go. Because then they can stand there in their plate mail and their shield with their AC 20 doing damage to everything around them and be like, you got to hit me or this is just going to keep going.
Right, yeah. And then I have to fail my concentration check, which is not going to happen. So have fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but and again, this kind of gets me back to that, like, there are ways to build games to go to any set of archetypes. There is a popular one, which is tank, healer, DPS, but I also think you can build games to hit many more groupings of abilities that are important to how your game is done.
Let me give you a freebie, Geoff.
Ooh, I like
So we
freebies.
talked about how Dota 2 is too complicated. I'm going to make it complicated. To Jeff's point, Dota 2 has functionally 12 archetypes.
12?
12. Here
How
they
many
are.
players can play?
5.
How many players can be on a team?
5.
Okay, just checking.
So there are 2 axes on which we do these. There are only 2.
One in each hand?
Yeah, exactly. Correct. Axe, 2 blades, extra close shave. We have carry, support, and oddly and specifically for Dota 2, we have carry support. You could be both. Then we have the 4 stats, which are strength, agility, intelligence, and the weird 4th one, universal, which means I get to pick which stat is my primary stat based on which stat is my highest stat at the particular moment, and I can use all of them. It's very weird. This all depends. If you've never played Dota and you're looking at this like you're looking at me like I'm crazy, take League and expose all of the stats behind the stats that you see and imagine that they're all rooted in core stats. And that's Dota. It's very weird. It's very strange.
Okay, wait, where are we going with this?
So you can have any number, you can have any combination of carry support with any one of the 4 stat arrangements. And each of them plays differently and uniquely, therefore 12 archetypes.
Okay.
So you can select for them, right? And you might now, or you can, if you prefer, you can look at the 9 sliding scales that Dota provides you for what a character does and is. But either way, it's got more than 4, right? It's got more than 5. So I definitely agree that there are ways that you can build games that include more archetypes or include more,
maybe this is the thing we should talk about then. If you were boiling archetypes down to basically number go up, number go down, try and make number not do the thing, to say that there are more axes worth measuring than just the number. And that brings in some of the other on different games.
I agree from a gameplay design perspective to build a successful game. Yes. But when
I'm speaking as a game designer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think where we begin to disagree is when we get back to, this thought experiment of what it means for a game. Like, you are being eminently practical in a commendable fashion, right? There's no question about that.
That is what game designers need to.
Correct. I'm dealing with this as
non-practical game designers don't make good games.
It's true. No, that's very true. Geoff, I need you to understand that I'm dealing with this as a game philosopher, man. There's
That's our fundamental disagreement.
Correct. No, which I think is good, right? And I think this also, if you're joining us for this episode specifically, and it's one of your first, I think this really showcases the places where Geoff and I disagree the most in a very interesting way, which I'm enjoying immensely. That like that those things are true and ancillary to what makes a thing a game, not a good game, not an excellent game, not an award-winning game, not a game that sells, not a game that'll sell and fund the studio, a game. Right, I'm like one step back, right, which is fine because I think I think everything you've said is true from a practical consideration when we're designing games. But I also think that there's a layer below this that's like really boring for most people. And to be honest, I don't delve in it usually because I would much rather deal with the practical considerations of games and scream about accessibility. That's another one of my big things in gaming. But I do think that there is like this abstraction layer below. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with snacking on this one.
Yeah. And as I said, there are other part of making a game interesting is realizing that there are other axes that are worth exploring. You know, like saying, oh, here's a crowd control class. Here's a scouty class. Sure. Here's a crafty class. You know, there are, and in some cases, like what were we talking? We were talking. I want to get to some of the examples because.
Yeah, no, I do want to just real quick ask you to say more about including crafters in this. Like, how does that relate? Given that many characters can be both a crafter and another combat class, right? Because I do think that while these things are like, you were also addressing that there are social aspects to D&D, a fact which I do not dispute and I completely agree with, but it is, while you might have a synthetic situation, a combination of many ideas that is a combat social situation, right? AKA the bard needs to convince someone of something while swashbuckling on a table. Hold on, I need to write this down. This makes for a great scene. Anyway, like I agree that those can exist. We also look at each part of that as its own like successor. Like each of those is its own part of a bigger game, right? Just like MMOs often suffer from bloat, right? Because they've got 10 billion mini games and subsystems and whatever because they've been running for too long and whatever, right? But those aren't we consider each of those differently, individually, and then we look at them together, right? So could you say more about including crafters in this? Because I'm not sure I follow where you're going.
Sure. So say you've made a game called Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Sure.
And you've said the three things we care about are combat, exploration, and social interactions. And we are going to design our game around supporting those three concepts. And each of our characters, classes that we design, are going to interact with those more or less for each one.
But it's going to, all classes will interact with all of those facets to some degree, even if it is a slight one.
All classes will have to. Okay. By playing the game of Dungeons and Dragons, you will have to explore. You will have to have social encounters. You will have to have combat encounters.
Yes.
You could theoretically run a game without them, but they're saying this is how it is balanced.
Yes.
Excuse me, this is how it is designed.
Constructed.
And so you can, for example, pick a class that more heavily interacts with the combat part of the game, one of its three pillars. But you could also have a character that chooses to more heavily, based on your design of them and the classes, more heavily interact with the social or the exploration or a combination. You could, for example, say, I am picking a lore bard. I'm going to be doubling down on some of the exploration and the social. And my interaction with combat may or may not be less or higher based on the spells I pick.
Right.
Where you could also pick a rogue who says, oh, I'm also going for the exploration and the social in a different way. And I also still have my, sneak attack and other things. I can participate in combat. But you might get a champion fighter who's like, I'm here for the combat. I'm going to roll in, and I am not at all specs for exploration or social. But you could be, like D&D lets you take pieces of that And so whether you are a tank, a healer, or a DPS is important for one aspect of those. But even within the combat, the exploration that the rogue does might be their contribution to set up the ambush for the combat. So this is talking about multifacetedly balancing a game around different kinds of things, so that when you get to each part, certain characters are like, this is where I step in and take more of the lead, and other people say I step back. And that happens the same in combat. There are people in combat who are like, cool, I'm going to sit back here and give inspiration, cast my occasional healing word, and use vicious mockery, and that is my, low-key interaction with combat, because this isn't what I'm interested in. And so you can design games basically around different aspects. And so crafting for me is saying, in the same way that multiple characters in D&D might be good at exploration, multiple characters in World of Warcraft or any other MMO or game might be good at crafting. Or I've bought a whole bunch of stuff, so I'm good at the auction house or transportation or all sort. Like, there are other aspects around things you can do.
I agree that there are other aspects.
Resource gathering as opposed to crafting.
Sure.
Like, there are other aspects of gameplay that are interesting.
I agree with that. I also think that when we talk about those, we're talking about different axes of the game, right? The only thing that needs to be balanced between my crafter and my combat class is that the result of my crafting needs to be balanced when considered with the overall state of combat, right? That we're not...
Whoops. Wrong click. I want to answer a question real quick before we go far away from this, just to finish.
Yeah.
So other than Ranger and Rogue, what characters are good at exploration? Well, any character with expertise can basically get good at stealth.
Sure.
You could also take an armor with stealth armor if you're going for exploration. You could take a wizard with flying invisibility, or a sorcerer. There's a lot of ways that you can help with the exploration. You can be a druid and wild shape to go checking things out. And in addition to wild shaping, now summon your own familiar to scout with you. So almost not every class, but many classes give the ability to dabble or excel in each of those three pillars based on how much you want to do it and how you build your character, because building for that might also mean that you're not as good at other pillars.
Right. And so I think this is a good point for us to pivot into like the part that I think we agree on the most, right? Which is that I'm absolutely down to say that Jeff's point that a character needs to be multidimensional is true, right? That is a relevant practical detail, right? Is that characters need to be multifunctional. And I'll also say that one of the biggest dangers that applies to games that have archetypes is that overdoing those archetypes, and specifically overdoing the Trinity, makes the game worse, and definitely makes the character that you're designing to do that thing worse, right? And I think that this is important because while we've had a lot of suggestions about games that treat archetypes interestingly, I also don't think that anyone can provide us with an example of a game that is entirely built around having characters or classes or ideas that fully conform to any of the archetypes, even the non-Trinity archetypes that are present in that game, right? In every game that has tanks do damage. In every game that has healers can also do damage. Sometimes they don't, but they can, right? Isn't it Shadow Priest? One of the priests in WoW does I do damage to this person to heal someone else. I turn it into a healing battery, right? Like
drain tanking, or drain healing.
Drain healing, right? Or that it is important to remember that when we're talking about archetypes, we are also beginning, we need to move between the space that I'm trying to occupy and the space that Geoff is trying to occupy, which is we need to move from this place of the theoretical cold analysis of what is the purest form of this idea into a practical one, right? And I do think that is really important to hammer home here, right? That everything has to move out of its extreme archetypal like inception, and furthermore, that tank man, healer man, DPS man are bad ways to start designing characters, right? That having a concept and then figuring out how it applies to the combat system makes much more sense, right? For instance, in 14, Dark Knight exists. Dark Knight in previous Final Fantasy games is
a different, not Batman?
No. Dark Knight is an extremely edgy character who's largely focused on sacrificing their own health pool to do damage, right? They are largely a damage-based character in other Final Fantasy games. In 14, they're classified as a tank. Does that mean that they don't do things that are extremely edgy and blood magic related and summoning the darkness from inside their own soul to like become a literal manifestation of edgelord and do damage to things? No, of course not. They absolutely do all of that. They have an invulnerability that requires them to die. They have to die in order for their invul to go off. It's literally called Living Dead. It's completely edgelord, right? But that's a concept first that got slid into an archetype loosely, right?
And that to me is why I was arguing when we first started that, like, I don't think the archetypes exist in any meaningful way, because sure, dude does tanky stuff, but he also does all of this other stuff, so that if you're trying, and what I was saying, people break the rules immediately, because yes, there may be a theoretical pure form of it, but that would be so boring that nobody builds it,
right?
Because you want to go do your damage, you want to go do your crowd control, your healing, or your scouting, or all of the other fun things around there. And so people can build, and maybe actually let me throw you some. People can build towards an archetype, and good designers do, because again, saying that's a tanky guy, that's a scouty guy, that's a crowd control-y guy kind of thing, help people understand what they're getting into and form groups together. But again, it should be it's not a platonic ideal, it's a loose set of...
Correct. And
a lot of the abilities tend towards tank, but here's some other cool stuff.
Right. I think this is a tanky guy who, right? And that who statement is the difference between over-indexing on the archetype and using the archetype to guide design in a way that yields an interesting thing. This is a DPS who partners with another damage dealer and supports their damage as well as the damage of the entire party, and can provide shields and damage mitigation and healing.
Cloak and dagger?
Dancer,
okay.
Dancer in Final Fantasy XIV has the lowest personal...
Oh, sorry, I was thinking Marvel Rivals.
Yeah, but also a good one. I main C&D when I play Rivals, though I haven't played Rivals in a long time. C&D is a good example, right? In that they have damage amplification on a healer, which is great, by the way. C&D is great. But in the same, so the who, right? The who statement, this is a DPS that, or who... right? The modifier statement is what makes it interesting and what enables the buy-in. And you can argue whether the buy-in or the archetype should come first, but both of them are equally important to making a synthetic whole that works. Because either one on their own sort of falls apart. Because if you have something that and I think part of the problem here is that for very few players in team games, outside of D&D, and I'll fully admit that D&D is weird, very seldom are jack of all trades, jobs, classes, characters rewarded heavily, because generally speaking, you're trying to be the best at something, and being second best at a bunch of things rarely accomplishes what you need. Enter bards, and that's a whole different conversation.
I say there are games that actually reward utility. Because, for example, utility could be another axis that we measure against. And for me, having literally created the crowd control style class, to me, crowd control is its own axis. I understand the modern meshing of crowd control and tank, but I also understand the meshing of crowd control and healer, or the crowd control and damage deal.
I think one of the problems that we're running into is that more modern games have chosen to eschew complex crowd control in favor of responsive crowd control. That is to say, instead of having I put down a zone of silence, they have oh, this enemy spellcaster is casting a spell, and you can see that they're casting a spell because of the way that they are. Someone who has a I'm going to punch them in the throat button should press the I'm going to punch them in the throat button, which is one of the difficulties, right? Because I've never existed at the same time period as a game where crowd control was like the primary thing, right? That a class that I wanted to play did. Even in D&D, like, and that's partially because I shy away from that, right? Like,
and honestly, I don't think we've ever had another enchanter since I made one.
I think EverQuest stands... Well, EverQuest was also mind-bogglingly complicated. I've looked at playing EverQuest on stream with Geoff, by the way. That's and we're not gonna, because
games have evolved. Games should evolve over
they should.
The decades.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to throw out quick. And again, can I not click on a thing again?
Yeah.
Oh, so again, and Bull said, what's the purpose of utility though? Either damage mitigation, resource generation. It really depends again what the game is going for. There are games that basically switch around objectives rapidly, and in that case, is having a strong utility character. Somebody can say, I'm not the best at anything, but because we're playing a game where we need to do this, then we need to do this, then we need to do this. Having somebody who can help all aspects of that as high utility can be super useful.
Let me give you a stellar example that's incredibly relevant to an upcoming event. This Saturday, for charity, we'll be playing Deep Rock Galactic, a game about 4 dwarves trying to mine things in a sci-fi environment, and you all will be able to summon bugs in order by giving money to charity. There will be big gribbly bugs, and you can summon them. I will be playing the Scout. Geoff, the Scout is a utility character. Let me tell you what the Scout's abilities are.
Sure.
I have a limited ability to do damage with a gun and a shotgun, but my grenades do no damage and merely apply a slow to all enemies caught within. It's crowd control. My flares, my light sources last longer, and one of my primary utility abilities is to launch flares into the ceiling or walls to illuminate the space so that other people can fight. And my mobility ability, it's a grappling hook. I'm one of the Scout is one of the fastest characters, so my job is to go scoop up people who are down and provide light, and occasionally, if I have time, throw bullets at enemies. But most of the time, my job is make sure everyone has enough light to see and the gunner doesn't murder everyone by shooting blindly into the dark and moving quickly. Right? So to your point, there are utility things that they might, in my incredibly abstract, filed off, most base platonic form version, map to that. But I will also admit that it's incredibly difficult even for me to see that mapping, right? I'm not saying that they do or don't. I'm saying that they could, right? And that the utility, to Geoff's point, is a different kind of thing. Right. And I would also say that DRG absolutely participates in archetypes because you have 4 extremely different archetypal characters, and we can argue about how the 4 characters do the thing on Saturday. But
and again, archetypes aren't bad. They help players identify roughly what they're going to be doing in the game.
Yeah.
What was which MMO with that? Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
You're telling me.
Yeah. So ESO doesn't have a firm Elder Scrolls Online.
It's a skill node based system, right?
Yes. Kind of. It does. Okay. So Elder Scrolls Online my pitch is, hey, what if your Skyrim character could play Skyrim with 3 other people? Enjoy. I'm not kidding, by the way. That's the best pitch for it. It has an incredibly complicated skill system where the armor and weapons that you're using and the class that you are combined to give you a list of skills you can choose some from, and then it has a skill node system. But it's complicated enough that the way that they do tanking and healing is you get to say what you are and then do it. I'm not kidding. When you declare what you're queuing as when you queue for a dungeon.
For some reason, they mapped the Trinity onto that. You queue as damage, tank, or healer, despite the fact that it's not a game that has damage, tanks, or healers, and that because most people play solo most of the time, if you built yourself purely as a healer, you'd have a really miserable time in the game. The
Right.
same as if you were pure DPS or pure tank, because you need to be able to do all of those and other abilities as well.
So, for instance, one of the better healer classes, the Warden, has a bunch of abilities that can be used for healing, and also summons a bear. And the bear is like indestructible and just mauls people, right? So like you can do all kinds of healing and stuff, but also there's a bear following you around. Like, so they don't map, and it's an entire MMO that has the veneer of the Trinity but doesn't need it, right? Guild Wars 2 also, I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, only vaguely participates in this because they similarly have a what weapon are you using plus what class you are sort of skill system. And characters are much more self-reliant, and there are ways that characters can act as tanks or supports or focus on damage, but it's all more hybrid. I would say, like in my big theoretical model, that all of the characters can be more towards the middle of the giant triangular graph, or can temporarily and at their choosing move towards one of the points if something is, yeah, they can spike for a little while, right? Yeah. If they need to, right? And these are fascinating, excellent examples of how even if we can see the Trinity in the game, it doesn't have to bind the game to the Trinity, right? Whoa, oh boy. Oh, hold on, Geoff. You have become, oh no. Geoff's become a robot. Chat, clap if you believe in Geoff. Clap if you believe in Geoff. Oh no. Oh God. Hold on. I'm so bummed. We're having such a good conversation. And by the way, chat, while I try and get Geoff back, thank you all for being so active in all of this. I know you all have been chiming off in chat, and I've seen a lot of really good points, and we just don't have time for me to pull all of them up. No. Try one more time. Ooh. Hold on. I gotta message Geoff.
Test.
Now I can hear you. Nope. Now I can't hear you.
A little better now. I hit send keyframe to viewer.
Okay, so I can see you, but your audio and video are desynced. So let me try one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, Geoff, could you count for me?
Testing. 1, 2, 3,
you're
4,
desynced.
5.
That's unfortunate.
Do you want me to drop and join?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, it is impressive, sync loss. Yeah, the robot revolution did take its first victim. So I think that there are a lot of like other viewpoints on this, right? Like the bulls, the Trinities, and tank healer DPS, those are roles that accomplish the goals of mitigation, resources, and damage. I agree that that's another way that we could view it. Although I do think that we need to, if we were going to have this in a way that we could get to that, I would need to do a lot more prep to deal with us being in a space that's much more theoretical, right? Because I agree that one of the places where Geoff and I disagree, and I think a lot of you are coming at this from a very experiential point of view, and I agree that from that point of view, everything you're saying makes sense, is that I'm trying to get outside of experience on this and trying to talk about what the thing could be, right? Like I'm trying to talk about like this philosophically interesting concept behind all of that, and I don't know that I'm equipped to do that without, like, I'm not kidding, 30 minutes of preamble, right? Like,
testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Now you're back. All right, cool. Anyway,
what happened? We don't know.
Robots. I'm gonna blame robots. I'm gonna blame another AWS outage. I'm gonna blame, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, Will, yeah, that's correct. I'm trying to get at a kind of I think this is no, that's yes, 100%. I think there are people who subscribe heavily to the Trinity. I think there are people who think the Trinity is bunk, and I think there's me who thinks that I am actually further away from this than I think a lot of people think based on my line of argumentation. I think where I end up is I think that the Trinity exists as a way to mathematically talk about one perspective on a game design, on games and on the ways that they
aspect of combat.
Right. And I will again stress that I believe I could accomplish this had we more time, that it abstracts beyond combat to merely working towards a goal with oppositional forces involved. Right? That is a way that I could do this, but that's a very long conversation where we have to talk about like what we mean by goal, and I don't want to do that. So, but yes, for combat for certain, right? But I will also say that it's very important to acknowledge that the difference in what makes a successful game from one that gets stuck in the mire is how you move away from the pure thing, right? So like...
Maybe this is an interesting point to bring up Fellowship here, where they designed a game around 3 different archetypes of classes. And I might want to sprint through what we mean by something in a second, but somewhere along the line, something that they did for one of their classes, the tank class, and I haven't played the game, so I don't know what it is, was not as interesting or did not sell the fantasy as well as DPS and healer, resulting in there being an imbalance in the game right now.
And I will tell you what that thing is, Geoff, as someone who tried to get into tanking and is having a tough time with it.
Okay.
One of the tank's jobs in Fellowship specifically is routing. It is to...
What do you mean by routing?
That's a great question, Geoff. In order to complete a dungeon in Fellowship, you must kill a number of mobs equal to a kill score and then defeat the boss. That is how you measure accomplishment. You can't just run through the dungeon and just defeat the boss. You can't just kill mobs and not defeat the boss. You must do both. So the most efficient way to do this is to...
Oh, that's interesting. They basically remove sneaky or stealth from the option by saying, must kill X. Okay.
Yes. So... one of your jobs is to figure out how to get as close to 100% as efficiently as possible and take the party through that route, killing all of the mobs and ending up naturally at the boss so that you can do this in the smallest amount of time possible, because one of the criteria for successfully completing higher level dungeons is to do it under a time limit. You're under a time limit.
Why is it the tank's job?
Because they are the one doing the pulling.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it is a pulling-based... Gotcha.
Yes. Geoff, based on what I have just told you, the lack of which common MMO UI UX element would make that job incredibly difficult for first-timers?
Oh, I could think of a whole bunch. Ability to gauge strength of mob, some sort of like radar or mapping system so you can actually see what you're doing.
Pause.
Oh, did I hit it?
There's no mini-map. There is only a full screen map which completely obscures your view, and there is fall to your death planes. So you cannot have the map open while you are moving, and you cannot see the information you need to make that decision unless you have that map open.
I'm guessing they also didn't give them stealth?
No. Because there's no fog of war. So you know which mobs are going to be where. You don't need to go scouting. But
stealth would also mean, for example, you could sneak up and get yourself in prime position for... Like, back in my old day, one of the reasons that we actually had a rogue or sneaky style set of classes was they could go sneak up, scout around, find the thing, evaluate, and even without a mini-map, actually do pulls, because they were able to fulfill the I can scout part of it.
Sure. And I think that there is a world where that could be done by the community to compensate for this weakness, right?
But that also then played into the fantasy of scouty, roguey kind of thing.
Yes.
I sneak around, I do the thing.
Correct.
And it's one of the reasons actually monks in EverQuest 1 were great, because they had an ability called Feign Death, which they'd fall over. Almost like, oh, you're dead. Okay, what's the next thing to attack? And you removed yourself from the aggro list.
Yeah.
So you could pull things in, and if you got an excess, you could be like, oh, I'm dead.
Right. One of the really weird things is that it's possible that that extra pulling might become the healer's job, because at least one of the two healers has an aggro drop button where she goes like stealth, and it's not like a real stealth, but like she drops aggro. It's Sylvie. So yeah, but like to your point, right? This is a non-intuitive thing where a non-damage based, non-mitigation based missing element, in my opinion, is one of the things that's causing there to be problems with people adopting a play style, right? Is that the archetype is not being supported because that wasn't a priority. Now, to be very clear, I think Fellowship is a very interesting game. It's still in early access. I think they have time to add a minimap. They're tackling.
Well, there's going to be a lot to go.
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Right. To be clear, this is not like Fellowship is bad because they forgot minimap. It's no game survives first contact with its player base. Right. Like every game when it gets into early access, especially a live access, a live service game, is going to need patches because people will break things because people are gremlins. Right.
One of the other things for scouting, there are a number of games where the map may stay the same, but monsters may move around. Different monsters may spawn in different places and things like that, which also is one of the things, like if you're actually, this is part of game design. If you're like, hey, one of the fundamental things for our game is we want scouting to be interesting because we think that's a fun part of gameplay, you then build things into your design to make the scouting fantasy actually fulfillable. And so like if you have a game where mobs are static and maps are static, you're not building a game where scouting is interesting.
Yeah. And that's and again,
this is part of what you're building for what your players, what you're building for your players to go play.
Yeah. I also want to just bring up one thing that as we move towards our wrap up that I have been noticing, because a lot of people have brought it up. Let's talk very briefly about the problems of using City of Heroes as an example.
Ooh,
so
superheroes.
Right. City of Heroes is a great fan-run MMO. If you're not familiar with it at all...
It was a great MMO and is now a great fan-run MMO.
Correct. It shut down in 2012 and got revived by a bunch of fans and is, in my opinion, a shining example of a company going, you know what? Sure. When the fans are like, we want to run it ourselves. And the company was like, you know what? We don't care. More power to you. Right? One of the problems with using it as an example is that it is of a different age. Right? Many of the MMOs that we're talking about that are super relevant in 2015 or in 2025, excuse me, started after City of Heroes shut down, right? So it's not that it's not true. It's just that it belongs to a different era, right? And it becomes difficult because we could talk about we could focus on like EverQuest and RuneScape and City of Heroes, and we could focus on like Ultima,
Warhammer Online,
right?
And
Dark Age of Camelot, and it's been true. I think one of the things that also makes this conversation difficult for Geoff and me is, Geoff, when was the last time you played a tab-targeted MMO seriously?
Not for a while.
Right. And I played one Tuesday, and I'll be playing again. Actually, I played one this morning while I was eating breakfast, and I'll be playing again tonight, right? So we're talking about different...
But I have played a whole bunch of MOBAs and RPGs with character parties.
Right. Yeah. So no, and that's not to say that we're that you and I are not drawing from equally valid groups of games when we talk about this. We're just also talking about like different eras in all of the things that we're talking about, right? Because I didn't like Baldur's Gate 3 and I don't play League. I played Dota in ye olden days, right? Like, so that is one of the difficulties in this conversation is we don't have a lot of...
The other one, though, that you're bringing up, which is interesting, is Holy Trinity is also, in some cases, a genre... Constraint's the wrong word. Vision.
Yeah.
Superheroes, for example, when you went and watched The Avengers, or, you go see Guardians of the Galaxies or The Avengers, there isn't a healer. I mean, there are a couple characters that might be able to do pinch healing, but there isn't a character there going, okay, Iron Man, heal, heal, heal. in the fictional case of how you see the comic books or movies executed, and in the same thing, like Hulk might be called a tank, but he's also, you could easily classify
extremely
him as
destructive.
Yeah, DPS. I mean, so superhero genre doesn't play into the same as the fantasy genre on how classes are built or characters are molded around.
Yeah.
And so because of that, City of Heroes is also coming in with a non-standard, a non-fantasy based assignment of the fantasies they want to fulfill when you pick a class.
Yeah, it also does bring up, and I think that this is probably one of the things that we might have done differently if we had to do this conversation again, is talking about the difference between healing and support. Because many games now adopt tank DPS support. What does support mean? That's like a whole can of worms, right? Healer is
That was my other thing about the archetype, is like when you say tank, if tank means 4 different things in 4 different games, how much can it, like, the archetype is really squiggly at that point.
Well, or the archetype is the nugget at the middle of all those things that's the same, right? Just like healing is a kind of support, but not all support is healing. All ARB, not all BRA, right? So, yeah, anyway.
Somebody mentioned, by the way, earliest Trinity, and like, I know it wasn't D&D, because D&D didn't start off with a Trinity. D&D started out with a quad.
Yeah.
Even then it was a really loose quad.
Right. I don't know that there's, I think
it wasn't at least till 2010s. Like, I don't think,
would say it's probably earlier than that, but
maybe.
Well, wow.
Actually, you're right. It probably is earlier, but like, I think it really picked up as a broader.
So
actually, you know what I would say? It's a shorthand.
It is.
It's a great shorthand. And
it's a great contrivance for making parties that can do content and fill things. I would say it might be WoW, genuine.
Yeah.
Simply because
one of the funny things too is tank didn't used to mean crowd control. Tank meant ability to absorb damage. Right. And only later had crowd control added to it.
And now I would say that one of the it's not even necessarily the ability to absorb damage in many games. It's the ability to control the fight, that it's a subspecialization of controller, right? Which is like a whole other conversation that we could have about what it means to control a fight and control the pacing. Which is one of the reasons why Fellowship includes routing in the tank set of responsibilities, because that's a way that they control the dungeon. It all gets really complicated. So we are unfortunately out of time here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us for this ridiculous episode. Thank you all so very much for giving me this present for my birthday. I've enjoyed it immensely. Again,
well, by the way, Will, happy birthday.
Thanks, Geoff. Please, if you're watching this and you're like, wow, I want to see more of Will being ridiculous, have I got the event for you. This Saturday, October the 25th, from noon Eastern to midnight Eastern, we'll be doing some crowd control Deep Rock Galactic Rock and Stone for charity. I will be playing with Matt, with the mods, with some guests throughout the day. Please join us for that. You'll be able to give to our charity of choice, Direct Relief, and in exchange for those generous donations, you'll be able to do things like summon bugs or get our characters drunk on stream. You'll be working towards a variety of interesting charity incentives. So please look forward to all of that this weekend.
So really quickly, since I think we just had somebody hop in who hasn't seen us live streaming before, Connor, welcome. We've been streaming on Twitch as well as doing extra credits for way more than a decade.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've been streaming here I've been here since 2018.
Yep. Yeah. And extra credits has been streaming even before, but Will has been our main streamer. And half a year ago-ish, we realized that YouTube had finally made
streaming work.
Streaming work. So we stream 2 shows a week.
Yep.
Design Club every Thursday at 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern, where we talk for an hour or two about game design live or look at games. And every Monday morning we do Games for Breakfast, where we talk about the week's gaming news plus. Yeah. In more of a rowdy shock jockey kind of way. Yeah. With Will and Matt. Matt is our voice narrator, and who, if you ever see somebody live in an extra credits or extra history video, it's Matt.
That's Matt. So, but thank you all for joining us. I think that's it for us. So all that remains is, the usual sign off here, which is Say bye to the people, Geoff.
Bye to the people, Geoff. Thanks, everybody.